because it's such a large subject, we're going to be spending probably the next at least 1 or 2 sessions dealing with it. And what I want to do before I go into this discussion of the attachment to our ego, I want to kind of give you a kind of metaphysical overview of how the ego came into being. And not just so much from a psychological point of view, but I want to give you sort of like the evolution and the origin of ego. And I must admit to you from the outset that the approach will be a little tedious, but you should bear with me. Very often when doing these kind of things, I am very, very restricted because the manner in which I was taught, and I was taught by a great master, you see, and I don't have his skills. I don't have his eloquence. I'm not able to articulate the profound as simply as he was able to do it. So you will have to bear with me in the inadequacies of my own intellect. But I have to try to share with you some of the depth of this subject. Because this attachment to our ego is so very, very, very important that we learn how to detach ourselves from our own false image of ourselves so that we can derive the full benefits from being human beings. You remember on a separate occasion I mentioned to you that just the fact that you're in this human body is an extraordinary phenomenon. And it will not occur again, and that you have through millennia, through aeons, through kappas, through cycles of time that is too long to even be condensed into a number, have struggled to attain to this pinnacle. And as you have achieved this, you also have, during this opportunity of being a human being, the possibility of truly experiencing bliss, peace, and love, way beyond the scope of our wildest imagining. And so it's really important that, you know, I try to instill in you the urgency of this detachment from ego, this separation out of our clinging to this false image of ourselves, and speak to you a little bit more about what underlies this false ego, this false image that you have of yourself, and what has happened to it that it has been contracted into an ego. It will give you a sense of your divinity. It will give you a sense of who you really are because you don't know who you are. And you suffer because of that. The first order of business on any spiritual or psychological path is you must know thyself. You must know yourself. Drop everything. Really. Pause. Stop. Like a person who is lost in a wilderness, when you don't know where you're going, the best thing you could do is to stop, stand still. Be still, as the Bible says. And try to get some knowledge, try to get reorientated. Listen for the distance shatter of people or traffic. Get some sense of direction. Because if you keep moving through your life without this knowledge of yourself, you're going to become nothing but increasingly more miserable. This is the key to all happiness. There can't be no happiness unless you know thyself. And this false image that you have of yourself and the clinging to this false image that you have of yourself prevents you from really knowing who you really are. Hence, everything that you will do, clinging, acting out of this false knowledge, this false image of yourself will be wrong. It will not be fulfilling. It will not be satisfying. It will not lead to any happiness. It will not lead to any peace. It will only increase your experience of dukkha, of suffering. And we shouldn't miss this opportunity to break free because who knows when it will come again. It's very interesting that we're now seeing a kind of new emergence of a new kind of awareness among black people. This is not by chance. This is something that has been in motion for 2,500 years. Every 2,500 years, this wheel of Dharma turns. And it comes back to a new people. And for black folks, the wheel has turned. Hence, 1.5 million men through it deep. That don't just happen on a lark. Something deeper is going on. There is a rebirth occurring, you see. And you are very fortunate to be in this black human body. Please do not blow this thing. Do you understand? Jesus, from where he's at, is longing to get into a black body in this next couple. Buddha and millions of Buddhas are standing knee deep to get back into a black body. I'm telling you, you are where it's at. Because a great birth is going to take place. And we mustn't miss this opportunity. So I want us to bring a particular seriousness to our discussion of this subject, because it will liberate so many. Those of you who had an opportunity to watch Minister Farrakhan deliver his keynote address at the Million Man March might have noticed that he read from a piece of research on Willie Lynch. And for those of you who've been around the house for a while knows that it is because of these people like Tuma Say and Seth Ra and Bilal and Aretha and some of the old people who we call 2.5 years ago of distributing that research from the house. So our messages are given only to small audiences, but they ultimately reach. We're like that black brotherhood working from the etheric region through other vehicles. But the knowledge that is being shared with you, please, don't think this is small knowledge. This is great knowledge, great teachings. And for 2,500 years, it had not been divulged. So get this and pass it on. And you will be making an immense contribution to the resurrection of an entire race, indeed of an entire humanity. So let us begin with the origin of ego and how it came into being. And I'm not going to punish you with an exhaustive thing, but I wanted to give you a big picture, because once you have a big picture, it's easy to work back toward details. You have heard me say on so many occasions that we are all, without exceptions, nothing but manifestations of the divine, of deity. What I'm saying that the real nature of self is God. The real essence of who you are is made out of the same stuff that God itself is made out of. The only difference is quantity, not quality. We are miniatures, if you will. We are the microscopic. God is the macroscopic. And so we are the manifestations of all that we mean when we use the term God. This state of absolute godness when this God was simply one, unmanifest, undualized, unsplit, it individuated itself into a myriad of individual beings. That's who we are, like monads. But we are individuations of this very material, this very stuff, this same consciousness. And it is with this process of individuation of that which is undivided and undifferentiated in one, into a unit that marks the origin in the beginning of the experience of egotism. Because egotism technically is a feeling of being separate. All right? The word for it that we use is called ahankara. And again, pardon me and forgive me for having to resort to language that is unfamiliar. But as I mentioned on many occasions, we don't have the precision in our language to talk about this. But fundamentally, ego is our experience of separateness from that which we have emerged. It is the feeling that you are separate from God. Fundamental. Egotism is the experience that you are not God. The experience of being individuated manifestation of God has been replaced with the experience of a false self. You have to understand this, that the image that you have of yourself is a social construct. You are nothing but a conglomeration of the opinions that other people have of you, beginning with your parents, friends, relatives, brothers, sisters, teachers, etc. You are a socialization process. And that is false, because it obscures your reality of who you really are. So the first obscuration on the real self, that self which is a manifestation of deity, the first obscuration that covers up our awareness of who we really are is this false sense of self that is created through our undergoing the process of socialization and being reared. And the whole journey back to one's real self and to the knowledge of one's real self involves simply a process of deconditioning. There's nothing else you need to do. You need to decondition to get back to where you are and have always been. With this understanding then, let us begin our examination of this false self. As I've already indicated, this false self is made up of many things. Certainly one of the things that it is made up of is the opinions that other people have of us. And you need to look at that. You have an image of yourself. Feel it. Feel your image of yourself. What does that image of yourself really consist of? Feel it into it deep, deep, deep. The image that you have of yourself. From where did that come? How do you know you are those things? Have you thought about it? So this image is made up of opinions of others. In fact, it is held together by the opinions of others. Isn't it? Isn't it? Have you ever noticed that when people change their opinion of you, you change your image of yourself instantly, almost simultaneously with the changing of their opinions? Somebody comes along and says, "Oh, Pam, you intelligent." Now you feel all intelligent. Then another person comes around and says, "Pam, you stupid." Now you feel stupid. But you yourself have no independent feeling separate from the commentary of other people. And the whole object is, what is your original nature? What the Hindus have called your swabhava. What is the nature of your original self? And to find that, you have to cut through the opinions that people have of you, because people have all kinds of opinions of you. And people who are attached to you, who wish to manipulate you, will manipulate you through that process, knowing that you are dependent for your sense of self-worth and value on their opinions. And they control you like that. They co-opt your life like that, and you spend your whole life in a pleaser syndrome. You become a pleaser. And now you're constantly trying to please. Because the fear is that if you don't please, they will lower their estimation of you. And then your experience of self-worth will come tumbling down. And you will start feeling worthless, useless. Opinions of others very often form the core of our image of ourselves. In addition to other people's opinions about us, what else do we find in the equation that makes up our self-image. You have to think a little bit about it. What are some of the other things?
Sometimes people can start tripping on what they want to be, and they start believing they're that, and they're not.
Sure. Their hopes, aspirations, goals, ambitions. All of those things are found in the contents of your image that you have of yourself. And very often, it is this material, Emma, isn't it, that is the most difficult, isn't it? We all know about self-esteem. I've talked about it so much, but for those of you who have not been in any of those sessions, you need to understand that I make a distinction between self-esteem and self-respect. They're very different phenomena. Your self-esteem is the contents. It is of your ego. It is your hopes, your aspirations, your ambitions, your goals that you have set for yourself. Very often predicated on the opinion that other people have already given you. You're intelligent, Leonard, so I believe that, and then I form an ambition out of that assumption, don't I? All right? So very often your own personal hopes, aspirations, ambitions, and goals is rooted in somebody else's opinion that they've given you. You follow me? And someone has told you that you are nice and that you're kind, and you started believing that, didn't you? They might have been telling you that to manipulate you, obviously. But you bought it. And so now you have formed a false image of yourself as being, I'm honest. Yes, you honest when there's nothing at stake. Yeah, easy. You honest as long as you're not thrown in a situation that requires honesty. Yeah. That kind of honesty don't count. You arrogate to yourself qualities that you do not, in fact, possess. What are some of the other qualities that we arrogate to ourselves under the influence of other people's opinions and make them a part of our own aspirations, goals?
One of the ones I think is one of the most important is this thing of intelligence.
Oh, yes. Intelligent. You know, I'm very intelligent. There is no evidence nowhere in your life of intelligence at all. It's everywhere you look in your footsteps, you see nothing but stupidity, nothing but immense ignorance. But yet you are clinging to this false image of yourself as being intelligent when there is no evidence. You're intelligent. You picked the wrong job, the wrong husband, the wrong wife, the wrong friend. And yet you say you're intelligent. What kind of intelligence is this? That always results in wrong choices. It is not real intelligence because, and you cannot have real intelligence because you cling into false intelligence. And one has to really let go of this false intelligence. This sense. It is said, for instance, that if you have a lot of knowledge about other people, then okay, maybe we can even say you're intelligent. But if you have a lot of knowledge about yourself, you are definitely enlightened. And that is the distinction between the so-called intelligent person and an enlightened person. The enlightened person has an immense amount of knowledge about themselves. They are intelligent when it comes to themselves. But we say we're intelligent. And even about matters that pertain to us, are we able to act out of that intelligence? Of course not, because the intelligence is not real. I know that shooting dope is no good. You don't know anything if you're still shooting dope. That's a false knowledge. It's not real. It's hearsay. You go on what you read in the paper and what the psychologists and the doctors say, oh, shooting dope is bad for me, you know, and you study fine up dope. You don't really have any real intelligence. And it's hard to see that unless you look at your life. Isn't it? So you're right, intelligence. What are some of the other things that we will find embedded in this image that we form of ourselves that I'm calling self-esteem. Self-esteem means your estimation of yourself. It's your opinion that you formed of yourself, you see. What you would like to be, what you hope to become one day. And it's not what you are, right? What are some of the other things? You seem to be awful knowledgeable in this area, sister. Huh? Well,
I had to think about it a lot.
All right.
Hurts. The whole concept of being in love. That whole concept.
Ooh, brand new, brand new. Loving or in love. How often do we hear when we are expounding and advertising our false self, you know, I'm a loving person. Then when we go and examine in life, what do we find, folks? Have never loved nobody. Nowhere. No capacity. None at all. Have brought bliss to nobody. Has not triggered the experience of joy in nobody. Yet they say, I'm loving. You have the potential to love, yes. Don't misunderstand me. By definition, you have the potential to love. But having the potential to do a thing is a very different thing. Yes, we have the potential to love. But we go right past and say, I am a loving, kind, sweet, compassionate, fair individual. And there is no evidence in your life of that at all. It's a great trip, isn't it? It's a great piece of mythology. I'm scared to ask you anymore, sister. Somebody else. Yes, Lieutenant Rashni.
All right, what about beauty?
Beauty?
And a lot of that has been projected by mainly the Europeans, what they put on TV. And they don't put emphasis on like inner beauty. A person may be physically beautiful based on what we've been taught. But actually they may have ugly ways.
Yeah.
So
yes, that's very often.
and I know that that's a real strong characteristic among women. It's like,
Well,
I don't know,
don't
we've been
start
telling them, sometimes we tell them they look good all their life and they kind of carry themselves like that. It's like, you know, every man really wants them, and that's the kind of attitude that they have. You know, like that's a virtue, but it may be one, but when you look beneath all of that, it may be something else other than what they perpetrate.
You're in a sense of saying that we arrogate to ourselves a value that we really don't possess.
A vanity.
A vanity, right?
And it has no gender.
It has no gender. And what is vanity? Vanity is the false basis of pride. Vanity is the false basis of pride. It is being proud on the basis of some virtue or quality you really don't possess. The classic illustration is the emperor who had no clothes, who thought he was shy. Didn't he? Right? So people who suffer from vanity have a sense of all this great value, when in reality there's nothing there to base it on. Yes, sister?
I would like to say that I think that one of the things the brother mentioned about women, it doesn't have any gender, but it has been placed more of an emphasis for females, and therefore it becomes a greater test, because that's the only goal sometimes offered to female children.
Of course.
You know, so.
That's correct. It is one of the great tragedy of the patriarchal structure of society, where women have been minimized and reduced. I mean, it's a real trip. It's a real trip. And the miracle is that we can have a sajilva or a mirava, you know, emerging from that kind of condition and becoming great mystics, as they say. You see? Imagine the tremendous thing that they had to overcome to attain the enlightened state. Because now, in most women, the ego is pushed down not only in these kind of non-physical things, it is pushed into the body. Now you have contracted even more. You have to understand what we're witnessing is a contraction. From God, you are contracted into this ego. And then this ego is further contracted into this body. The image of ourselves based on our body is the lowest possible contraction of who we are. You can't get any lower than that. And unfortunately, a lot of women have been pushed all the way to the lowest part of the ego term. It is deep. It is deep. And do you think that men are spared that? No, because we are born of woman. So it becomes circular. We definitely reap what we have sown. Definitely. Very interesting. And it's worthy of us spending a lot more time on it than we have in the remaining balance of this session. But we want to begin to outline some of the things, you see. Now, I said this is all the material that makes up self-esteem. Nothing wrong with that. I'm not condemning that. But I don't want you to confuse that, right, with the real thing. We'll talk about that later. I want you to, however, see that this is the stuff that we're clinging to. And this is the stuff that is constantly throwing us into situations and circumstances in life for which we are hopelessly ill-prepared to succeed. Moving out of this stuff, we move into relationships that really require honesty and tolerance and patience, and not possessing any of those qualities, you fail. And you fail miserably, right? Right? And then you get up out of that failure and you run into it again because you cling into this same old false image that you have of yourself. Now, how do we go beyond the false image that we have of ourselves? Because we have to talk about that. Otherwise, we will remain at the level of philosophy. And philosophy does not transform anybody. How do we go beyond our false image of ourselves?
Introspection. Introspection.
Introspection? And what do you mean by introspection?
Well, it could start from a point of meditation, or it could start at a point of you just, as they call critical thinking, just constantly asking yourself questions. Not so much as trying to, I got to find the answer right now, but just asking that question and then being more aware of yourself day to day and your interactions with other people, and eventually the answer is going to come to you. Okay. But the first point is
introspection and reflection.
Right.
All right, we'll be talking about a little of that before we end. In fact, we're going to have some homework along that line. Sister Keeper, you had a comment?
No.
Okay.
You usually don't even get to introspection unless you've been in enough pain.
So you're saying that
once we understand that we're in pain and it's, we get to a point where we don't want to continue in that vein, and then we start to introspect, to analyze why we're having this pain. Why is this incident occurring all the time? Why am I meeting the same incident, getting the same results all the time?
So even prior to that, then you're saying there has to be some kind of awareness and some kind of dealing with the denial, coming out of that denial. Is that what we do, folks? Are most of us in a deep denial about how miserable our life is? The poet says that we are living lives of quiet desolation. Deep down, just miserable, just suffering, barely able to hold on, right? But we don't want to acknowledge it. Because to acknowledge it means that our whole approach has been wrong, and I've already told you that that's hard for us to do. To acknowledge it means that you have to admit you don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing when it comes to this thing about life. I shared with many of you that one of the first lessons I learned when I got married some 27 years ago, that I didn't know nothing about living with another human being. Totally shattered my ego. Totally destroyed my self-esteem. Because, June, I'm thinking I got all these qualities that make up a good husband and a good father. I'm tripping, right? You see? And having to enter into a real relationship outside of my mind with another human being. I experienced it. My immense ignorance. I really don't know anything. And this admission of your own ignorance is the first step in acquiring wisdom. We have to acknowledge that we really don't know how to be happy. Fundamental. We're guessing at it. We're making it up as we go along. We have to really acknowledge the fact that our lives is full of too much misery and suffering. So in some respect, June, I think that is fundamental, and I'm taking that for granted, that most of us, contrary to what Loretta said, are intelligent enough to know, right, that we're miserable, right, and that all the other things we're saying is just for show in politics. And then we can move on to introspection. What else do we need to do?
I think it will help if
to
we,
break the attachment to our false image of ourselves.
It will help if we start to construct a model, and that will consist of getting right information as to what our self-image should be.
How do we go about doing that?
Examine where we came from.
Examine where we came from. All right. So you're talking about some self-examination. Is that very much like introspection, or a little bit more detailed? Well, one thing we know that Socrates says that a life that is not examined is not worth it. Yes, Rob.
Go ahead. I was finna, in my opinion, you said what else do we have to encounter? I think a rude awakening.
We have to have the experience of a rude awakening.
Right.
Shock. We need shock treatment. All right. Now, before we laugh at that, that's usually how most of us really get the first break from captivity to our false image of ourselves. Life sends you a rude awakening. Now, the man may divorce you, and you can't handle that. The woman may leave you, and you can't deal with that. That tears you up, it breaks you down. That is one of the things I have witnessed. Because we bring into these relationships so much nonsense, so much illusion about ourselves. And then when that other partner leaves us, splits, then it literally breaks their heart. Hence the metaphor. Heartbroken. It tears them up. We all know, we know people, some of us have been there. You know what I'm talking about. When that person leaves you, now you just messed up. You've been shocked. You've been given a wake-up call that you're not all that you are cracked up to be. That somebody don't want you. And this realization that somebody don't want you is too much. You can't deal with it. It totally destroys this ego mythology. You see my point? So you're very right, Rob. Sometimes it requires shock treatment in the form of a tragedy.
We either take one or two directions. Either we, like they say, come out of denial and get better, or you decay, or you put yourself in a situation where you end up, withering away, as I said.
Yes, Bob.
Or, to Rob, a lot of times you just repeat it. I'm finding that the ego, you can get heartbroken and do the exact same thing over and over again.
So the person ain't stop clinging, is it?
No, and it's, I was just thinking as we was going on here how, even, with the rude awakening, how resilient the ego is.
Yes.
Because it's just firmly set in there. And I've talked to Azur about this in my own personal situations. I find that the only thing that shake me up a little bit, I have to go through, I can go to all, I come to Satsang and I hear this stuff, and I can agree with it and I see it, but I don't learn any. I'm one of these crazy kind of people. And the only time that I can learn is if I have the experience. And I told Azura, you know, I can just see millions of lifetimes ahead of me because I just want, you know, because if I have to learn, I got to go through all these experiences. But then, when I have the experience, and then now I understand. But, you know, it's a great setback, but it amazes me to see how powerful, you know, we're always talking about ego, and it's kind of just a word, you know, we all understand it, but when you really see the ego, how you understood that, how your intelligence, you could really see and understand what's been said in that song. But yet, until you have that particular experience where you had to go through something, as you say, you had to go through it, and then you could see and say, man, look at how messed up I am, you know, because, you know, it's really there, and that ego doesn't, and it just don't dissolve, even with discovering that one thing and you find that out, it's still there. And okay, you found that one thing out, and it's still strong. It's not going, it's still there, it's still powerful, it's still there.
Yes, yes. So you need to have an actual experience with some awareness. And it still sometimes, as you say, Baba, has not gone away. This ego is a very, very difficult thing.
Yeah, and the fact that you're aware of it doesn't change it.
No, it didn't change it, do it?
That's another step.
So how do we get past this ego? Because we have to find this out. We have absolutely the obligation to ourselves to liberate ourselves from the clutches of our own false image of ourselves. And folks, we have got to find out how to do that. That's what liberation is all about. That is what salvation consists of. Yes, Tony?
Well, like most of us know, the awareness is there, but it's taking action. And a lot of people don't want to take that action.
Because it's painful.
Well, you know what? I think that when you really make up your mind, well, some people know and refuse to deal with it because, see, if you're in a situation that's making you unhappy, but I'd rather stay because I don't have to take the action that leaves. You know, so if you say, I'm unhappy here, I'm willing and ready to take whatever action to go into the unknown. We're afraid of the unknown. So the awareness, I think a lot of us know what we may not know what makes us happy, but we know what's making us miserable. But we don't want to take that action.
Yes, that fear of the unknown.
Of the unknown.
Attachment is that clinging to the knownness. Right? However painful and miserable it may be. But at least it's familiar. It is the clinging to the familiar. It is a kind of aversion toward the unknown.
And then too, a lot of times we don't have examples in our environment that give us the information to change. Sometimes we don't know what to change to or how to change.
But we know that it's fundamentally
we
rooted
know
in
there's
ignorance.
a problem, but we don't know what to do about it.
Yes. Sandra, sister, either one, doesn't matter.
Well, I think maybe we have to go back to our childhood and examine our patterns and why we fit into certain patterns according to our parents or whoever had influence over our life, and to find out why we react in certain situations the way we do.
Psychoarchaeology. Right? We have to become psychological archaeologists, and you're right. You see, what we may be beginning to start seeing here, that we're going to have to do a combination of these things. Aren't we? We're going to have to maybe do a lot more work than you actually thought. But you're absolutely right, because a lot of that clinging and fixation to this false image of ourselves is rooted in our childhood, where we really formed the image of ourselves. Please make a note, you formed that image before the age of 7. Now, I know this is going to strike you as odd, but I'm telling you, this whole image that you are perpetuating of yourself was formed before you were 7 years old, and on the intelligence of a 7-year-old, and on the awareness of a 7-year-old. You got an image of yourself that you formed when you had no education, no wisdom, no life experience, when you was at the nadir of your knowledge and wisdom, when you were but a child. And Sandra is right. Some serious psychoarchaeology has to take place. And you really do have to reach back in that past and begin to edit a lot of things. Yes, sister?
It's funny, Sandra and I were actually almost going to say the same thing, but I would like to say that I think you're absolutely right about the childhood. And I think we have to look at how we teach children to maybe start really working on them becoming vicarious in some instances, that they don't have to stick their hand in the fire to realize that it's hot, and that when we don't tell stories anymore, when all the games that they play have to be action games, they don't listen, they don't imagine, and we don't give them instances. Well, what would you do in this story? They don't hear the danger stories, and consequently, when these people grow up and their ego is confronted, it is very strong. But they say, well, you have to actually hit me. You know, I don't have any imagination, and I won't bow to you presenting something for me to say, well, maybe this, maybe that. You know? And it does get a certain resilience.
It almost cut them off from reality.
Yeah.
Just throw the kind of sensitivity to reality. Yes, sir.
I was just wondering, what is the whole definition of self? And I think that really needs to be explained.
Sure.
Because when I had that shock treatment, introspection, all the time I thought I knew who I was, because I thought it was just limited to me being my, the phenotype, my skin color, me knowing as much as I could about my history. But then I still kept repeating the same experiences. It had nothing to do with my physical person. And then I really began to understand what self was, or who self is. Yeah. And that is very important, because a lot of times we say self and we're still dealing with ego.
Still dealing with ego.
Still dealing with ego.
Still dealing with ego. Absolutely. Now let's expand that point, because Aretha, for those of you who don't know, has been through this for quite a while. So she's done a little work on herself. And I want you all to have the same advantages that she had when she was first introduced into this same process. We talked about self-image, self-awareness, and all these other things. But as you say, what is the self? Now, our image of ourself is a composite phenomenon. It's made up of body, right? What you call our phenotype, right? In fact, most of our definition of who we are is linked with the body, right? Because your body has relationships. Your body has a mother, it has a father, it has a brother, it has a sister, all of these other things, right? There's another level of self, right? That is on the emotional, psychological level, right? That is a self that is made up of what? Your likes, your dislikes, right? Your ideals, your attitudes, your philosophy, your worldview, etc., etc., etc. And some people are more identified with that than they are with their body. You have to see what kind of person you are. That's why I say you have to feel, where is the basis of your false image rooted? Is it in your body? You might not be so rooted. Your image that you have yourself may not be so rooted in your body. You may find you most stuck in the emotional, psychological, mental thing. Your opinions about things, highly attached to that, all those kind of things. And then there is the spiritual self. So these are the levels of self. The levels of the self. Physical, astral. I should actually put it in astral causal, because I mean the combination of emotional and mental. Okay? And make then this a fourth dimension. I shared with you all last time, I talked to you about the 4 dimensions of being. For those of you who were there, you will recognize this schematic again, and just in a different form. So let me put this here to purely mental. And I apologize for punishing you with these metaphysics, but we're going to need them later on. The levels of self, right? And to some extent, these 3. Because here, most of us don't even have any experience of ourselves at all. Strange! You really don't have any experience of your soul. You have mostly the experience of your mind in its contents. And that is what you've been calling the self. That's the farthest you can go. And feeling yourself is to the level of your mind and the contents thereof. You can't even feel a soul. Is that right? Now that we see the immenseness of the problem, let us return now and start looking at some methodologies, because that's the whole point here, how to break free. Now, I'm going to have to suggest something to you that may be a little foreign to you all, and may require you all to take advantage of my willingness to spend some one-on-one time with you, because I need to take you through a lot of processes here. But the process that is going to be the most effective in you experiencing the true nature of the self is going to be meditation. Without meditation, there is absolutely no way to have the experience of the real self. Let me be very clear about this so that I don't mislead nobody in this room, so that you don't start thinking you go read no book, attend no seminar, do any kind of minor reflection and come into this knowledge. No, there is no way possible. You must enter into a process called meditation. There is no other way to know the true nature of yourself. And that's a fact. And so, those of you who are really, really committed to maximum liberation from the levels of false self, then you will need to explore meditation. Now, I'm not going to go into a lot of that here. I will make myself available, since we're not going to be doing a lot of the Sunday songs while we're doing the workshop. I will make myself available on Sundays through any kind of arrangement that you make with the law to spend some one-on-one time with you, because there's a lot of setting up that has to be done in that. But I just want to tell you that that is the real way. Anything that we're going to talk about in here is going to be a descent from there. Because as Baba says, and it is true, you must experience your real self. You can't intellectualize about it. There's no way to arrive at it. You can't emote or psychologize about it. You actually have to have a real experience of who you are. And the way you do that is by dying. Now again, I'm throwing out something that's going to trip you up. I'm telling you, you literally have got to enter a process of dying. What St. Paul called dying daily, or what the masters call dying while living. And what do we mean by dying? We simply mean you will have to complete a process of withdrawal. If you are, remember, a contraction, you are a contraction. This is an involution. Egotism is an involution of deity. The only way out is through an evolution in the opposite direction. Meditation is a movement into the inside of yourself through the successive layers. And the only way you can do that is through a process called meditation. There is no other process. This is what all mystics, all saints, all sages have fought. This is the whole purpose of Christianity, Buddhism, Hinduism, all religious sciences, even psychology, psychotherapy to a certain extent, is to give you access to deeper and deeper levels of your being. And you can't get real deep access to levels of your beings from reading books. At the most, you can get to a level of your mind. You see? So you have to go into this process called dying. And this process will involve a couple of things. First thing is the withdrawal of awareness from the physical body. Because this is the least representative of who you are, the physical body. The least, you've had millions of these things. You see? It is the least definition of who you are, the physical body. So the first thing you have to do, you have to raise your awareness beyond the physical body through this process called meditation. Are you with me on this? I know it's getting esoteric in here, but I have to give you the real deal. You see? Don't want to play games with you. Don't want to send you on wild goose chases. You have to be able to raise your level of awareness of self beyond that of the body. And to do that, you have to enter into the process of meditation. One of the first things that you can do is to be still, to take what we call an asana, or posture. I'll go into those as we go further. You're going to actually have to sit this body, hold it still, so still, and for the adequate amount of time for you to lose awareness of it. Now, you do this every night. When you go to sleep and you lay in that bed, you move from this so-called wakeful level of consciousness down into a dream state. You actually lose awareness of your physical body in order to have a dream. By definition, you can't enter into dream sleep without simultaneously giving up awareness of this physical body. Are you clear with me on that? I'm talking about an experience. I'm talking about an actual experience. We're not talking about a dogma, a doctrine, a philosophy, a psychology. We're talking about an actual experience. Meditation, instead of falling downward into sleep, you move upward. That's the only difference. But what is required is that you have to come out of this wakeful level of consciousness, because you can only remain ignorant in this state of consciousness. You follow me? And so you do that by losing awareness of the physical body first. But those of you who practice any kind of meditation know how difficult that is. You can't get your attention and awareness off your physical body. You can't never know anything more than your physical body. Now quickly, I'm just going to put these up here and we're going to break them down next time. Then you got to get beyond your emotional stuff. You got to get beyond your emotional stuff. Almost all your attention is caught up in what you like, what you don't like. The very first thing that the ego says when it arises says, I want. That's the first movement of ego. Desire. I want. I like. I don't like. You have to withdraw your awareness from your set of likes and dislikes. I'm talking about work. Because what you like and dislike is not real. It's not the real deepest level of who you are. You have to understand, most of us identify ourselves with that which we like and dislike. I mean, think about it. Think about it. Your sense of self is rooted in your set of likes and dislikes. I don't like this, I don't like that, I want this, I don't want that. Look at that. And where do these likes and dislikes come from? Huh? Where did your likes and dislikes come from? What is the origin of your likes and dislikes? Where they come from? Family, conditioning, society. Are they original to you? No. You like pinto beans because that's how you were conditioned. Or you don't like pinto beans because that's how you were conditioned. But in no case is it original. You like coffee or tea because of your conditioning. Simple. So all of your likes and dislikes that you're clinging to as the basis of who you are as an entity, as a being, is borrowed. They're not original to you at all. I mean, do you see this? And then once you're able to move and liberate yourself from that, in many respects, these are like coverings too. These are like bodies as well. Then you got to go to the mental part, don't you? And what do we encounter on that level? Your opinions, right? Your opinions, your worldviews, your values, systems, your ethics, your morality. Is that your stuff? Is that your stuff? Huh? Where did you get that stuff from? Is that your stuff? Is that opinion your opinion? Where do you get your opinion from? How did you form your opinion? You borrowed it, didn't you? Right? You put it together. You made it out of pieces of this and pieces of that. It's like quilt making. It's Frankensteinian in its origin, isn't it? It's not rooted in your experience at all, is it? all your so-called knowledge. Look at it. I mean, look at it close. From where have your knowledge come? Is it yours? Is it really yours? And yet, we identify with our knowledge. I know this. I know that. And it's that knowing is not even rooted in your experience. You didn't have the experience. Your knowledge is secondhand, borrowed. Right? It's not real. And yet, look, when you are clinging to your knowledge and then you are navigating a course of life based on that, what is going to happen? What is really going to happen? I compare very often to what we did when we were in school, when we really didn't understand the math. You know, we didn't know the answers, you know. We didn't know how to get it, all this stuff. We looked in the back of the book. And we looked the answer up for the odd problems, and we wrote in the answer, but we didn't understand the process. So, because we don't understand the process, when life throws you something, you got to know process. And you scramble to look in the back of your book, what Mama said about this. What Mama said about it don't count. It may not count. Let me put it like that. It certainly does not replace your own knowing. So at this level in meditation, the ideal is to liberate yourself from the clutches of identification with your knowledge, which is all borrowed. And then, of course, its ultimate goal is to take you into the experience of yourself, your real self, what we call the soul or spirit, that which you were before all these other things were laid on you. And then once one comes into the experience of one real self, then one lives their life out of that orientation. And then life takes on a whole new experience. For the first time, you will experience what it really means to be happy. For the very first time. Imagine a life where there's no frustration. We can't even imagine that. Where there's no disappointment. My God, I can't. Can our imagination stretch that far? Where you're never frustrated, never disappointed, no anxiety, no clinging, fluid, no mental constipation. You can move, you flow, you flexible. You alive for the first time. And that's the payoff. Now, I spent a lot of time on this because as we move down now in the things, we'll be able to access deeper and deeper levels of this whole subject of attachment. We'll have the intellectual tools to make that examination with. So, though you may not see its utility right away, please just bear with me, and hopefully as these next series unfold, we will begin to see. I want to, as always, give some homework, okay? For those of you who are going to be with us throughout the duration of the workshops, I know we have some visitors, and they may not want to do the homework, but certainly those of you who are going to be with us, and you need to do this homework. Now, the first stage that we're going to start on, because I have to get you emotionally prepared to liberate yourself from your clinging to your false image of yourself. So the first level I have to work on yet is the emotional level. Prior to working on you on the emotional level, however, I got to lay the foundation for adequate understanding. And that is the purpose of these exercises. I've given them before casually, but this is very formally now, so I actually want you to do that. And this will help turn your minds. I call it Dharma, the Dharma exercise. And the first thing I want you to look at is the impermanence of things and events. I want you to do an essay. I actually want you to sit down, write for me an essay on your observation of the impermanence of things. I want you to look at events, circumstances, situations, and I want you to really see with your own eyes what I see, that these things are impermanent. They are changing. I want you to write me and tell me about that. I want to read some of these next time. I want to read your commentary, your observation, your notes on this reality. I want you to observe, and then I want you to write down what you have observed. I want you to see, is it true that life is impermanent, changing, always in a continuous process? See, I want you to look at events, circumstances, whatever means you want to approach it though. But I want a commentary from you on the nature of the impermanence of things and events. That includes people and relationships and all these other things. Just tell me what you observe. If none else, just write down and say, Bhagwan, I don't believe that. I don't think anything has changed. Okay, that's fine too, but do something. You know, don't leave it closed. But I really want you to see that. And I want you to note, how does that realization make you feel about yourself? And I want to know how it makes you feel about others. And I want you to know how it makes you feel about the world. It's very important, because this is called processing. If you don't process what you do, you don't get no juice from it. You got to process it. I want you to observe and see, maybe Buddha's lying. Maybe Jesus is lying. Maybe Muhammad is wrong. Maybe Kabir didn't know what he was talking about. Maybe Lord Krishna had taught a bankrupt philosophy. Maybe Ptahotep or Kajami was absolutely wrong. Who knows? You look. See, do you see the same thing? Is life fixed? Does life flow? Is life predictable? Can you predict life? Do you know what's going to happen? Look and see. Don't play games with yourself. And whatever you conclude, then tell me, how do that make you feel about yourself knowing that? What is the new feeling that comes? How does it make you feel about others? Because the others are part of that flux, aren't they? And how do it make you feel about the world? The first thing. I'm going to give you just one more piece of homework, because we don't have many workshops, all right? We don't have enough workshops scheduled to cover everything. But these are the Dharma exercises, okay? The other thing I want you to look at is the rarity of the human opportunity. I want you to look at how rare it is for you to be a human being. Because you have not even appreciated being a human being. You don't appreciate being a human being. You take this for granted. You don't know the value of what it means to be a human being. You don't know this immense opportunity. You playing with being a human being. You dragging your feet with this unique, one-of-a-kind opportunity. I want you to look at that. I want you to look at your health, appreciate it. Go to the hospital. Go do something. Go look. You taking your health for granted. Look at that. I want you to see the value and the immense opportunity you have of being a human being. It's a precious opportunity. And I'm calling it precious because you are a human being who have heard teachings. You are a human being who have heard Dharma. You have read the Bible. You have read Gita. You have heard something of the Quran. You have knowledge of the ancestors and their teaching. That makes your birth precious, because do you know how many billions of human beings on this planet that has not come in contact with the knowledge at all? Whose lives are relegated to nothing but a continuous effort of survival and bill paying, who have not had the luxury of pausing and even reflecting about higher life. Their nose are to the grind, day in, day out. They are so overwhelmed with suffering and misery, they don't have no time to take a class, read a book, reflect, pause. And you have this kind of precious human opportunity to do that. And you have done it. And many of you have been having access to these things for years. I want you to really reflect on it. I want you to really reflect on it. Try to understand the rarity and how precious it is to have the opportunity of being a human being. Then, I want you to process it. And I want you to tell me what that realization does, how it makes you feel about yourself. I want you to tell me how it makes you feel about others. I want you to tell me how it makes you feel about the world. So these are the two homeworks. I need you to tell me the conclusion that you come to about yourself as a result of doing that homework. I want you to tell me the conclusion that you've come to about others is after doing that homework. And I want you to tell me the conclusion that you've come to about the world after doing that homework. But I want you, above all, to do the homework. It is interesting that I think Jesus spoke for all of the great masters throughout time immemorial when he said that many will call upon me, Lord, Lord, and will not receive. Only he who does the will of God, only he who follows the teaching, only he who applies the teaching. This is homework. That is the whole function. It is to apply. So why? So that you can convert this intellectual information into an experience. You understand where I'm going? Because Baba raised a very interesting dilemma. You must be able to convert your intellectual knowledge into a first-hand experience. You have to have a process for doing that. Otherwise, for what are you collecting intellectual knowledge? You have to convert it into an experience. And the mind is an amazing thing. You can take the stuff, take it into your mind, into particularly the faculty of imagination, the creative faculty. And in that, you can actually create an experience as powerful in terms of transformation as an outside experience. See, Baba, the problem was this. You're right, we have to have an experience, but you've been assuming the only experience you can have is out here. That's not true. There is a faculty in you that is designed for you to step into and actually create experience at a non-physical level that are genuine. It's strange. We know that, for instance, in training athletes, if I have a basketball player that's having a bad free throw day or week or series, I can take this guy, stand him up, set him in a chair, and relax him. And so now go into that faculty of the mind that we call imagination, that your ancestors call Heheru, the house of creative energy, because that's where creative energy comes from, right? And you have to remember, the physical is a reflection of the non-physical, right? Reality does not have its origin here. It has its origin inside of us. Or did you know that? That the causal direction of reality is inward. It flows from the inside out, not the reverse. In any case, in the faculty that the ancestors call Heheru, that contains the creative energies, we simply take this man, set him down, and visualize himself standing in the free throw line, shooting 300 baskets, and all of them going in.
Is that the same as neuro-linguistic?
It's sort of like neuro-linguistic programming or neuro-linguistic conditioning, but visualization, the process is even more powerful than the Western counterpart. The ancestors called it Kula Yoga because you're actually able to link certain experiences. And I won't go into that yet. It's a little, next time we'll talk about it. But just for now, it's just using that capacity to visualize. You know how in a dream, can you see in a dream? Can you feel? Can you touch? Can you smell? Is the water wet? Of course. It's real. It has a level of reality. So you can take advantage of this capacity in human consciousness, visualize that person shooting that basketball, right? And after a certain amount of practices, when he comes down out of the visualization, provided he has been relaxed enough, the key is relaxation and concentration. that player can get up out of that chair, go into the gym, or go back on the floor for that matter, and his percentage at the free throw will go through the roof. Golfers do it all the time. They simply imagine in their mind swinging the club. But it's a mental thing. So you have to understand that you can create Baba D's experience in the mind, actually. So we're not limited to waiting for life to send us an experience, because who knows how long you will wait? Perhaps eons before they send you something to shock your butt, right? Shock yourself. Why not? You don't have to wait for a shock. This will shock you. Do this here. That's the whole design. This is shock treatment. It'll make you see something. So I want you to be able to go into that process of visualization. This is high visualization, I mentioned that. And give me your conclusions. And we will pick up from there next time. Are there any questions about the homework so that we be absolutely clear on it? Yes, sister.
You don't know how to
Certainly. Certainly. This doesn't take much time. This doesn't take much time. You know, it takes maybe an hour or two at the most.
It doesn't matter if it's current or past. It doesn't matter.
No, but I would like for, if it's current, to include everything that you know up until this day. You know. All right. And those of you who want to get together on Sundays and do a one-on-one and go through the psychoarchaeology, go through some of the childhood stuff, because that stuff is very important. Get yourself a foundation. Please contact the law.